And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. How you doing this morning, Nora?
Quite well, thank you. Got a little bit of a cold, so if I sound funny, that's why.
It's going around this time of year. At least you got it now than before your trip. So you and I both have
Exactly.
travel coming up next month where we're both going to be on the road for a while. So better to get that out of the way before we have anything like that happening. Uh, we have a special guest today. And before we get into the introduction, I'm going to let Nora do the introduction on that. I want to remind everybody, please do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Share, comment, do all those things. It really helps us out a lot. That way we can bring you more guests because we know people love to hear the people that we are interested in, that we learn a lot from. So today's guest is someone I've learned a lot from, and I know Nora has. So I'm going to just let Nora do the introduction.
I'm really excited today to introduce one of my probably most influential mentors, Eric Franklin, from the Franklin Method. I've taken a couple of the years of the Eric Franklin training, and I have to say, in terms of just transforming my teaching, his approach to using imagery and movement and teaching anatomy and really using creativity as a way to communicate were incredibly powerful to me, and really, I mean, honestly, changed how I taught, I think, for the better, quite effectively. So I just cannot thank you enough, Eric, for joining us and for bringing an introduction, at least, to imagery, the Franklin Method, to us. So, Eric, I'm going to let you do a more formal introduction, but we're so happy to have you. Thank you so much for being on Moving Conversations.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Great. So I want to start with asking you, how did you get started with movement and imagery? How did that begin for you?
Well, this was a long time ago, and I was a dancer at NYU School of the Arts, or learning to be a dancer in New York, which is pretty tough. And we would dance all day, ballet, contemporary, and so forth. And I developed a variety of aches and pains in my body. And I had the idea, well, dance is fun, dance is good for you, isn't it? But I noticed if you don't know what you're doing, you can really hurt yourself. So that kind of started my journey.
Interesting. And you studied, I know, where did imagery come in for you? I know some of your story, but I think it's, because I know it's such a powerful tool that you've learned to use for all kinds of things, healing, movement, performance, all those things. So tell us a little bit about where that started.
I think there's many sources. Well, first of all, dance, imagery is very prevalent. Dance teachers always use imagery for cueing to help the dancers understand what they're supposed to do. All choreographers use mental imagery. Martha Graham, for example, a famous choreographer, she said, I'm looking for someone who can imagine something in my dancers, not basically someone who has great technique, but someone who's able to imagine their role or their environment and so forth. And the same thing actually goes for theater. And then I also had a teacher called Andre Bernard who taught ideomotor or ideokinesis imagery, which is basically skeletal realignment. And that was very inspiring for me. But there's also other sources. I studied psychology. So you have, for example, C.G. Jung, who had developed, or one of his students, active imagination, so a type of therapy based on imagery, and many sources like that. But yes, certainly because I was a dancer and because mental imagery is so prominent in dance.
Yeah, when I first took your class, I forget how many years ago this was. It was at a personal trainer summit somewhere, and I just took it because I was a baby trainer. I didn't know what I was doing yet, and I sat in on it. And what I was fascinated with were not only how you visualize things, but even how on your slides, your presentation, the visuals. It gave me such a clear indication of what you were looking for, because we were talking about the feet and how the metatarsals moved, and I could just see it. And as soon as you were talking, it took me there. And immediately I knew what you wanted me to do. And I think in cueing, for whether it be Pilates or fitness or anything, when you're cueing someone to do something, you have to get your idea across to them in the clearest, easiest way imaginable. And I found that your cueing was just, wow, I got it. it just really set into me.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, the whole involvement with the Pilates world came a lot later. That was like,
Yeah.
because I studied Pilates with Kathy Grant at NYU, so I knew about Pilates very early on, but it wasn't famous or well known yet. And what is it? Now of course we can't even grasp that it wasn't known at that time, right? So initially, for example, I worked at the American Dance Festival. And there I started developing exercises for the students because there really was no resources yet. And so I made lots of notes, and that eventually turned into these huge books called Dynamic Alignment and Dance Imagery for Technique and Performance. And then I also worked with the Swiss Olympic gymnastics team. And there I had a very interesting experience. So there was one athlete, and of course these were young people, obviously gymnasts, and he had issues with his back and shoulder flexibility. And then I gave him one image. Try imagining this when you do the parallel bars. And he came back and said, this is so much easier now, right? I went, whoa, this stuff is powerful, So a lot of what I'm doing now, I learned sort of by just, trying it out and see if it gets a result. And sort of the same thing with dancers and turnout. How do you create a safe turnout? And it's sort of a lot of it came out of just teaching and figuring out what works and what doesn't work, making notes and putting that together into a system.
I would say, because I think a lot of people in my experience have done that. I think the magic for me, anyway, in working with you and in all the people that have worked with you, is that you really allowed the imagination and creativity to be really free, which I think in terms of communicating complex concepts like how the talus moves or whatever is really helpful. Like you took these concepts that can be very dry and very like what, and turn them into a way like, oh, I get it, right? It's the point of I get it. And it's kind of like, I feel like you've used imagery to enhance motor control and understanding, right? Taking it through, going through all the like boring anatomy stuff and saying, this is what you're trying to do. Oh, I get it. And then you can do it. So there's a really nice, direct connection for me in how you do that.
Exactly. It helps to understand complex processes in a simple way and helps you to embody them. But, I would like to maybe just do like literally a sales pitch for mental imagery. Just so people understand, because most people, oh yeah, I know I kind of know what it is, but most people don't even really know exactly what are they talking about, right? So there's something that's free, that's always available, that you can use for any pathology or any kind of movement you want to improve, right? And it's free. Would you want to have it? And it can help you with any kind of movement, any pathology, and it's even evidence-based. There's research to back it up. Would you be interested?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
You've sold us.
Who cares? It's like, what? And so what is it? It's the fact that we have sensory experiences, right? So for example, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. That's a visual experience. We can hear each other. That's an auditory experience. But you can also generate these in your head without the actual sensory input being available. And this can have an effect on how you move and also on your psychological well-being. So you can self-generate experiences in your head that actually have a training effect. And that's the beauty of it. And this training effect can even improve strength. I mean, people don't realize there's actually research going back pretty far, like 20 years. You can improve strength without moving at all. And, initially this sounds a little cuckoo, like, what? Yes, right. And how do you explain that? Well, basically, when you imagine a movement, you're doing everything like in the brain and in the spinal cord, except for the last little thing, which is the actual movement. So most of the training you're doing, just the last little thing you're not doing. And you say, well, I'm not interested in that. I want to move. Well, maybe your arm is in a cast. Maybe you don't want to lose that muscle mass. Like in 3 days, you've already lost 20% of that, right? Strength and collagen as well. So maybe you want to maintain that. You can mentally train. Or, you're traveling, you're in an airplane for 10 hours or something, and you still want to stay fit. Well, you can imagine movement, and it still helps you to gain some strength and flexibility. So basically that is like, okay, now I'm interested. Tell me a little more, hopefully.
No, that's certainly been my experience with what you've taught and the way that you present it. And that's been my experience as a mover. It's like if I can picture something and I can really imagine it, it can work. Now, I know some of the research that you've done, and I know you've done some research recently on how imagery really changes strength and motor control and how the body works. Can you bring in a little bit of that? I know there's a lot of things to mention on that.
Yeah, it's a lot we've been working on. And for example, this is maybe an earlier study, but interesting because it sort of highlights something, which is, can you improve jumping with mental imagery? So you would think that, to jump higher, basically you have to, gain strength somehow. And so we said, okay, let's use metaphorical imagery, 4 metaphorical images, and see if these dancers will actually jump higher. So we had one image of the dancers being a spring. You're imagining a spring, you're a rocket. Then we had lengthening the spine, images like that. And we wanted to find out, does that really help? And all of the images helped, which is very interesting. And the results are better than doing strength training. And we said,
Wow.
why would that be better? Well, it's better because strength training, now, how do you train all those muscles in the perfect synchronized way to improve jumping? That's quite a task. But one image can organize all the muscles and joints in a way that they synchronize together to improve better jumping. And in this case, we're using so-called metaphorical imagery, which is when you borrow a concept, from someone else, like a rocket, and use it in your body to improve something. It's just one time. It's called metaphorical imagery. So these were all metaphorical interventions.
That's amazing, and
That's fascinating.
It speaks to something that I think about a lot, and I try to kind of get my teachers and my students to understand, which is that movement doesn't happen from one place. Like so often you'll hear engage your serratus, or engage your biceps, or engage your glutes, and it's always like, okay, that's not right. It's not satisfying, and it's not really what's happening, right? It's usually like the whole body. And that's where I feel like the imagery work that you do is so much more powerful in terms of organizing the whole system to do something, as opposed to any bit.
What's interesting is this is something that I learned at university. One of my professors said, if you ever watch a child learn to walk, when they're first doing it, they don't understand it. It's like a series of muscles and neurological connections from A to Z that need to be put in the proper order. And as they start toddling, they get like ABC, XYZ, and there's sections, but it's still not all the way put together. And then when they walk, it's that nice, smooth, all the way from A to Z. And it sounds like through imagery, you're able to put those things in a better order right away, rather than just saying, oh, here, do this exercise, you'll get better at it eventually, and then you'll get stronger.
Exactly, which reminds me of a study we're currently doing or working on, which is on walking, which of course is super complex. And in the world of imagery, you can do this with or without movement. So you can do mental imagery without moving at all. Like right now, you can imagine your head floating up like a balloon and your shoulders melting like ice cream, but you're just sitting there and see, okay, will that work? Or you can imagine you're flexing and extending your spine, right? And when you do that, you're training the muscles and you're not moving at all. But then we also have dynamic imagery, and there's different kinds of that. And so in this research, we were having people practicing walking without doing the full, complete thing. So just kind of walking in place or doing minimal movements. And we found that that's very effective. And interestingly, this is something we do in dance traditionally. It's called marking, right? So if you see dancers in a class, the teacher is demonstrating, they're not just standing there still like, statues, they're doing little hand gestures, right? To help them remember the steps. And that's called dynamic imagery, when you're imagining a movement and assisting it with small movements, or actually using metaphors while you're moving. So I'm addressing that because you mentioned gait.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about metaphorical movement, metaphorical imagery, something about dynamic imagery. So talk about the different kinds of imagery. And I know this is a big topic, but see what you can, give us some different ways to think about this.
Okay, so we have Franklin method. So I have a method, it's called Franklin method. In the Franklin method, we use a lot of so-called dynamic neurocognitive imagery. And this can either be metaphorical or it can be anatomical. So for example, you're moving your shoulders, you're lifting your shoulders up and down, and you notice your shoulders feel tight. And you're trying to make them loose, but it's just not working. I want to have loose shoulders. I don't know how, right? Then you can borrow the experience, for example, of washing your hands with a slippery bar of soap. And you remember that slipperiness, which is a felt sense, and you transpose it into your shoulders or shoulder blades, and you move your shoulders up and down. Imagine them to be slippery bars of soap. And you go, oh yeah, this works. This I understand. Slippery, slidey, glidey. Okay, I got it. Thank you very much. So that's dynamic neurocognitive imagery using metaphors, right? But now, however, if you're an anatomy geek and say, well, okay, that's too flowery for me, I'm interested in anatomy, I'm interested in fascia, right? So then you could, for example, imagine a fascial interface. So the fascial gliding of the muscle under your shoulder blade on your rib cage, right? Mm-hmm. So you mentioned serratus anterior. In fact, the muscle under your shoulder blade, called subscapularis, when you shrug your shoulders, is gliding on the serratus, for example. Yeah. And you have actually something between the muscles that's similar to joint fluid. Yeah. That actually allows that to happen. So that will be the anatomical version. Oh, wow. These two muscles are sliding on top of each other because there's a kind of joint fluid in between them. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that joints can be anywhere between muscles as well, not just, in the actual joint like that. So dynamic neurocognitive imagery with movement, metaphorical or anatomical. Then you would have to talk about, okay, I get that. Now there's modalities. In other words, you can use imagery in many different sensory categories. The most common are kinesthetic, so felt sense, and visual. So you could, for example, imagine your shoulders floating up like balloons. Then you see the balloons. You feel the slippery bar of soap. That's the felt sense. So seeing and feeling are the most common, but a lot of movement teachers actually also use auditory imagery when they teach. So for example, they say, okay, now lift your arms up, or, lift your legs up. Actually a form of auditory imagery. And people go, auditory imagery, correct that. And the way I explain it is I'm going to sing something, and I'm not a great singer, but you're going to hear the rest of these two, and I'm sure you can. Da 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 da. Right? That's Beethoven.
Yep.
So to complete it, you used auditory imagery, and then another modality is gustatory, olfactory. That's probably more important for cooks, for example. So can you taste? Imagine you're tasting tomato soup. Can you imagine you're smelling the slippery bar of soap? Maybe it's lavender or something like that. That would be so. We like to have imagery be vivid, very alive, because then it has a better effect. So that's why the modalities are important.
And my understanding from this and from many other things is if when you're using imagery, it has to be meaningful to the person, right? It has to be something, because I know, I work with clients who love that kind of imagery and love to kind of get into the whole story of it and creativity of it. And other ones that are like, just tell me where my legs need to go. Right. Exactly. So you got to kind of choose your poison, as it were, choose your communication style.
Yeah, I agree. Like with the examples I just gave here, I would say, so this is not going to work if you had a bad childhood balloon experience, or I only use liquid, so forget those bars, so it's not going to work. So I think that's one of the things, if you're interested in using imagery also for cueing, is to be creative about it, right?
Mhm.
Especially with metaphors, because metaphors that can be in these different modalities, but they can also be in different spaces. So we had, for example, the slippery bar of soap and the balloons are inside the body. But for the same movement, and everyone, listening now can practice this, of course, you can imagine strings attached to the tips of your shoulders, pulling them up. And these strings are, of course, outside the body, and that would be outer imagery like that, yeah? So the image can be inside the body, it can be outside the body, but it can also be everywhere. So we call that a global image. So to go back, for example, to your back flexing, extending, you can imagine you're floating in the warm Caribbean Sea at the beach, and the water is, moving your back to the front, and, like this, and just massaging your back and moving your back. And that would be global because basically the water is everywhere. So that's how we make this more interesting. And that's what we can learn as movement teachers to use to find what works for our clients.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about cueing in the podcast because I find that especially people who haven't been doing this for a very long time, they get stuck on one cue. And rather than coming up with 20 different ideas, they'll say the same thing over and over, like beating a dead mule. It's just not working. It's not getting through. And what I find fascinating is when you do use your creativity, when you do come up with other ideas, when you are trying to, like you said, use your imagination a little bit more, you can see the light go on a lot better and a lot easier. You can see the eyebrows raise, go, oh yeah, okay, I got it. And then we can actually see their bodies change and see the movement change.
Exactly. And there's even a phrase for that. It's called the kinesthetic response. Is your cue working? You can kind of see it in the client's or student's breath or in their facial expression. You can kind of see, okay, is that hitting home for them? And of course, you can also expect possibly some creativity from your clients. Like maybe you can come up with a metaphor that works for you. But at this point, we do have to know that there is some clients that might say, oh, I can't imagine anything, right? And that may be true or maybe not true. And this, of course, is called aphantasia. So that is if someone, for example, has difficulty with visualization or kinesthetic imagery or auditory imagery, but very rarely or nearly impossibly does anyone have complete aphantasia. In other words, all the channels are kind of gone. So, okay, maybe not so good at visual, but good at kinesthetic or vice versa, or good at auditory like that. So we do sometimes encounter people with that, but most people are pretty good at this. And some people are actually really, really good at imagery. They're like just imagery geniuses. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So several things are going on in my head, but first I want to follow that up a little bit. What would an imagery genius look like? How does that influence their performance, their health? Like, tell me about the benefits really of using imagery that powerfully. What does that do? What have you seen that do?
Probably they're in a pretty good mood, because the research says that people use more imagery rather than less imagery. They're in a better mood because they're not worrying as much, right? So if you're focusing on balloons and slippery bars of soap and strings, moving your shoulders for you, or the Caribbean, if you have a rich imagery life like that, then actually it's mood regulating. So usually if people come to a class where the teacher's using a lot of imagery cues, one of the reasons they walk out in a better mood is because they have been imaging and using the cues, for example, in a Pilates class, instead of worrying about stuff. It's filled their head with some more light and pretty and, happy pictures.
So one of the things that I think about when I think about what influences our mood, et cetera, is that when we are in a state of anxiety or fear or whatever, oftentimes our imagination is kind of shut down, right? So it's kind of
Exactly.
like we can't,
Exactly.
we really don't have access to that creative part of our brain. So in many ways, influencing a classroom by bringing that in and helping them to just find that and engage in that is a really wonderful way to just change their mood. I hadn't thought about that. I like that.
Yeah, and the mood thing is kind of important because we know inflammation follows mood, right? So
Right.
people that are more unhappy, they tend to be more inflamed in their body, and then these people go, "Well, I can't do it, and nothing I can do." And yes, you can, right? So one
Mhm.
is imagery. So use images while you exercise. See if basically start a journal. So in the morning, right, today I'm going to have some nice images to make me feel better and, be a happier person, like that, because sometimes I say, look, the main things that you experience in your life are you have feelings, you have pictures in your head, you have words, right? And those are all the things we address when we teach imagery. So we have something called self-talk. We're all cueing ourselves. In fact, right now, as you're listening to this show, you're also commenting on it in your head. I like what they're saying. I don't like, interesting, boring, whatnot, like that, right? So you're commenting in your head. And these comments, of course, have an effect on how you feel and how you move. So getting that a little bit under control is one thing. And then you have the pictures going on in your head is the next thing. And they can have different flavors. And one thing I think that any person or movement educator should remember, posture and mood are very related. So if someone comes in and they're slouch, and I have an experiment. So if everyone listening would like to try this. So everyone please slouch. And now say, I feel great, and if you're slouched, that is a mismatch. It doesn't feel like it fits. Then reach up with your arms, like stretch your arms up like that and say, I feel awful. I feel terrible. And it also doesn't fit, right? So posture and mood are related. And now comes even more, for me, quite fascinating. They did this experiment where they had people be in bad posture, and then they gave them some news. Oh, did you know that? And in a bad posture, people would interpret news much more negatively than if they were in a good posture. Oh, that's not so bad. Yeah, okay, fine, whatever. So if you're in a better posture, you seem to perceive what's going on in a more positive way.
It's amazing.
So,
That's
because
really interesting.
Yeah.
people usually try to qualify good posture biomechanically. And, I'm fine with
Yeah.
that. Of course, all the joints, and obviously, forward head, going to have worse blood flow to the brain and whatnot. Yeah, of course. But the mood thing, right? And the interpretation of life events, that's like another layer.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Absolutely.
so often we get locked into the science of things. We want things to be proven, and something like mood is one of those that it's hard to quantify, whereas it's incredibly important to link that, because you're absolutely right. When you see a client come in, you can immediately tell what kind of day they've had. You can immediately tell because of their posture, because of how they look and how they're moving. And all of that's going to dictate what we do and the things we choose to do with those clients. And we got to get them out of that space, or else all their movement patterns are going to be dictated based on that.
Exactly. And actually mood even improves, even influences flexibility. And there's a neat experiment you can all try. All these are all experiments, so they may work for you or not, but it's a good thing. So just lift your arms up again and down and feel your shoulders, and then say, I feel great today. I'm having a great day. And then reverse that and say, no, I know today I'm having a bad day. It's just not working out for me. And then lift your arms and see if you feel any difference in shoulder flexibility. So, yeah. And, you can say, oh, wow, no, it's not complex at all. If you're thinking like that, I'm having a bad day, things are not going well, you're more in this defensive kind of mood. And obviously, the brain will then start to tighten up your muscles. Your whole system tightens up. So mood and flexibility, there's a relationship there too. And I think, people want to have easy fixes sometimes. You want a fast way to improve your flexibility. Just let's see how mood affects that, right? And people, once they get it, they go, oh wow, yeah, that's like, right? Change my mood, change my flexibility, not too bad.
Well, now you did early on in this process, say part of your sales pitch is, do you want something easy that will change your movement patterns quickly? And you've just done it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is a caveat though, I think, why some people, really resist mental imagery and like, oh no, because, people have opinions, right? People have opinions. And basically, doing mental imagery, doing any mental technique is trying out different mental states, trying out different mental contents, and looking at which one works best for you, right?
Right.
You're not ready to change the mental content, then you can't do mental imagery, so imagine a banana, imagine an apple, imagine a pear. So basically changing mental content, right? But people resist that. No, I don't want to think, imagine my shoulders are flexible, because they're not. What do you do then?
So one of the things I've been working with a lot is the concept from modern pain science of where pain actually lives, right? It doesn't really live often in the pathology anymore. After a certain point, it lives in the brain. And so much of that, and I know Brian, I've both seen that, I'm sure you have too. People who come in and it's like, I'm broken and I'm never going to get better, right? Just that's the attitude they come in with. My back's blah, blah, blah. I'm damaged.
Exactly.
And getting people to even see another viewpoint is a challenge. It can really be a challenge. And again, you've just provided a lot of tools to break open some of those belief systems, because those can be hardwired belief systems that are hard to open up.
Right. Which brings to another type of imagery, which is called end state imagery, or basically goal setting. So imagery is very big in goal setting. So one way to possibly address something like that. So yeah, right now your shoulders are tight, or you have, your back hurts and is in pain. What would be your desired outcome? What would be a goal? What's your goal for your shoulders, for your back? So asking people, okay, so how would you like it to be? Let's quickly look at that for a moment, so we're all aligned, like this. And then they're all starting to, if they're willing to do that, they're using imagery, and they're not even fully aware, but they're starting to use the positive imagery. Yeah.
Right. Excellent.
I'm not saying this is always going to work, but sometimes this does. Getting people talk about how would you like it to be.
You've got to find ways in. I mean, whether you're working with somebody in pain and chronic pain, or whether you're working with somebody who's trying to improve performance, like, again, all of those are belief systems, and all of those are kind of constructs we have. Oh, I'm loose. I'm too tight. I can't jump. Whatever those things are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid of auditions. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So, and there's many ways, different ways to address that. But the end state imagery, it's an interesting, when I ask groups, and, often you also have young students, do you have goals? And of course they have goals, right? There's things they want. Everyone has goals, right? So do you have any goals, like things you would like? Have you made a goal for your back? How you would like it to feel, or your shoulders? Have you made a goal for your body, right? And then they go, you're like this. Yeah, I mean, actually, we can have goals and have a picture or a vision, even for those things rather specifically, So that's another way. You have to trick people a little bit into using positive imagery. I mean, that's just been my experience. It's not, because people don't want to change their mind.
Yeah.
Most people have difficulty. This is how it is. This is how I am. This is how my life is. And now this person is asking me to imagine this thing or this cue or that cue, and you get resistance. And one thing I do, actually, I address the resistor, because I know people are going to resist. So everyone, imagine your shoulders are free and flexible and mobile like this. And then I go, okay, did that work for you? And then I go, it didn't work for you. Well, maybe the resistor popped up. So there's this little voice, oh, come on, that's never going to work. That's childish. That's too simplistic.
I love that.
In reality, there's lots of research that shows this works, right? So did you have the resistor going there? What is the resistor? The resistor is what you actually believe. And then I say, in life, you don't get what you want, you get what you believe, because you're acting on what you believe, not on what you want, right? And so, and then they go, maybe, okay, yeah, he's right, I was resisting, Some of them, not everyone, some keep resisting, but it is a device that sometimes helps people. Yeah, to stop resisting.
find I've never heard it put that way, and I love that, because a lot of my male clients are very stuck in their way, and they want to do this and they don't want to listen to that. And if you use flowery language, they shut down. They're just like, oh, just make me, just tell me what to do. Whereas that's a great way to get in, is sort of that backdooring it and calling it out for what it is. Is that the resistor? Is something resisting you moving better? Is something resisting you hearing or doing? I think just calling that out is fascinating. And I think I'm already thinking of clients in my head. I'm like, I'm going to try with them tomorrow morning.
Very good. Yeah, but of course, non-confrontational,
Absolutely.
Sort of in a humorous way, like this. Or with the male clients, maybe like, do you want to gain strength faster? And we know that if you use mental imagery, you're going to gain strength faster. For example, we know that if you focus on a certain muscle group or a muscle, you're going to recruit more what's called motor units, right? So then, of course, you'd have to explain motor units, right? Basically, you recruit more of the muscle fibers get going if you're imagining them than if you're like thinking of your shopping list while you're exercising or looking at a screen. And go, so I can gain strength faster. Yeah, using image. Yes, you can. And it's proven. So there we go. Might get them interested. Could be, So like that, what do they want? And show them that the tools you're offering actually can help them with that.
So Eric, when you teach people how to use imagery, right? I've been through, again, a couple of your courses, and I know a lot of people who have. And honestly, for me, it was incredibly powerful to just go through, do all the bone rhythms, do all the muscle work, and then you do organ stuff, you do kind of nervous system work. Are there other ways? Like, I know you also teach courses. You teach courses at dance studios and in other facilities. Tell us a little bit about where you teach, how you teach, what kind of your goals are.
Yeah, well, tomorrow I'm going to ISMETA, which is the somatic conference. And there, the theme of the conference is more about relating, communicating like this. And my topic is the vagus nerve. And of course, the vagus nerve is the nerve of biological communication within the body. It's the longest nerve, and it innervates, obviously, the vocal cords. So when you talk, that's the vagus nerve, and many things like that. And so I'm going to present on the vagus nerve, which is a very different thing, and how that relates to communicating and relating like that. That's just an example like that. But for example, in summer, in August, I taught at the Juilliard School. Very different, right? These people want to have fabulous careers, and you have to get them inspired in a completely different way. So for example, I say, how would you like to end your career? By your decision or by an injury? Well, injury prevention starts right now, and your body's made of anatomy, and that's why we're going to have to learn some anatomy. Okay, and then I ask them, what do you want? I don't say impose on them, oh, you have this problem, you have that problem. Oh my God, look at that. No way. I ask them, and they say, oh, my core or my foot needs to point more, my back is tight, or I want higher legs or more turnout. That's very common. And I say, okay, let's start with more turnout, Let's get more turnout. Yeah. And then, oh yeah, okay. And then we do the bone rhythms. And of course, if you do the bone rhythms properly, you're going to get more turnout. So that's completely different than is meta like that. But I think it's also depending on, whether you're teaching in China, the US, or I don't know, Poland, you have to adapt to the audience. What kind of experience they had before? Are they athletes? I've worked with swimmers, runners, and so forth. Are they dancers? Are they just lay people who want to feel better? So yeah, it's definitely, the class has to be reinvented for the audience each time. And in Franklin Method, we have something called student-centered teaching, which basically the class is not about the teacher just talking about his expertise and what everyone should do and what they should fix according to his opinion, but about the client, the student, having a better experience of themselves, their body, and their movement, right? So the whole pedagogy is oriented towards that. And then what we do is embodied anatomy, because only if you have a felt experience of the anatomy is going to help you move better. And the proof is, I have a proof, which is no research, but it's a proof anyway. If learning anatomy would make you a fabulous mover, then every doctor MD would be a ballet dancer or a star athlete. It doesn't transfer like that. It just does not transfer that.
No, the data set proves otherwise in this particular circumstance.
I don't think even we need data. Just like the Newtonian laws, which have never been proven, but they work, right? It's pretty obvious it doesn't work like that, yeah? And yeah, then I try to inspire people about facts like, okay, what's the most complex machine in the universe? Do you want to go and get help from the most complicated machine in the universe? What is it? And some people will point to their head, your brain, right? Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. And so how to use your brain? Imagery, words, all the things we're talking about today. Yeah. And it's free and always available. And it's the biggest pharmacy also in the universe, right? Who controls the pharmacy? Who controls the deliveries? Your imagery, your thinking, your metaphors, And I go, okay, I'm fine. Okay, show me how it works. Because, let's face it, for example, the Juilliard dancers, they're not inherently interested in anatomy. They just want to be more successful, dance better.
Right.
And it has to be controlled, And with imagery, yeah, it's not such an easy sell. It really isn't, I have to say, because people, yeah, they don't quite know what it is, and they don't know it's a tool because it's invisible. You can't see it. A reformer, you can see. Right. Yeah, there it is, right? That's what the exercise looks like, and the imagery, it's invisible.
And they don't understand it. They don't understand the power of it.
Yes,
and
the power
that has a lot to do with it.
But you can just look at it from a marketing point of view, right? How do you put it on a picture? So if you want to promote a Pilates class, I don't know, you show a picture of someone beautifully doing some Pilates move, the hundreds, or on the reformer and doing some incredible like this, or your yoga class, they're doing downward dog or something. And now imagery. Right? You have to show some kind of image. So it's a different animal. It's an invisible thing. It's happening in people's mind. Yeah.
It's like you need to open up the head and see what their screen does, but we can't do that.
Exactly.
Right? Like if you could just do that and see what the screen's doing, that would tell us something. That's
actually a good illustration right there. One should exactly. I don't know how can. Yeah, that would be a fun thing. Screen inside. If I make that drawing, I will send it to you for sure. So a screen inside here showing the image exactly of the day. Good idea.
So one of the things that I loved what you said about all the teaching that you're doing and how you're doing it, because one of the things that I've always just absolutely admired about you is you understand anatomy at a deep level, and you've gone all different directions with that. You also understand psychology, which is a really important piece of imagery. You understand how the sort of neurochemistry works in the body. You understand kind of motor control and how it really isn't one muscle, one movement. It's how does the whole body work together. And I love, I'm inspired again, just to spend some time talking to you and hearing all those pieces and how they come together and how you bring all of them forward in your teaching. It's just, anyway, I'm having an amazing moment.
I've watched you teaching as well. You're brilliant as well, both of you. I've watched your classes recently. Yeah, fabulous classes. So yeah, amazing presentations. I love your slides as well. Very nicely done. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll see each other again probably next year, I think. Yeah, in London, possibly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Could be.
Yeah.
So
then,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So one thing I wanted to just like bring up for those who are listening is I think imagery is incredibly powerful. It is the most powerful teaching tool, period. Actually, I'm just going to say that. I think it's the most powerful teaching tool by far. Can you give us a couple more examples of places where you've used it and seen real change, whether it's in a physical condition or whether it's in a performance situation? I think some examples or some stories would be really helpful here.
Okay. Well, first of all, there's one kind of imagery that we didn't mention too much yet, which is the motor imagery. So in other words, using imagery without moving. For example, with lifting the shoulders up and down. So you can do that. And you can also do that just imagining you're doing it, but not doing anything at all. And that's a little hard to grasp in the beginning, unless you maybe do the following experiment. So take your arm and bend your elbow like that. And now we're going to imagine we're bending and stretching our elbow. And I want to see if you can feel a little movement, even though you're not trying to move. So bend your elbow. Everyone stretch your elbow. Bend your elbow. Can you feel that? Stretch your elbow. You're still getting a little result. So you're getting that minimal movement. That means the whole nervous system is working to create this movement. Bend, stretch, bend, stretch, bend, stretch, bend, stretch. And then you compare the arms, and most people will feel smoother or easier. So it's just another way. And that's called dynamic imagery. And I usually combine it, that's called motor imagery, and I combine it with the dynamic imagery. Another study we did was, can you improve flexibility with mental imagery? So we already saw you can improve power, so you can jump higher. Can you improve flexibility? So we took these dancers, there were like 32 dancers, and we wanted to see, can we improve their hip flexibility? So it's a leg lift. It's called a développé. And of course, this is useful for a lot of people to improve their hip flexibility. And we worked with metaphors only for 3 days. And we did pre and post measurements to see if we can get their leg higher up. And we did. And we did it without the dancers cheating or anything like that. So you can use mental imagery to improve your flexibility. And this is an interesting point because most people think you need to like stretch to improve flexibility. But stretching is probably the most tricky. I'm not against stretching at all, but it's the most tricky way to improve flexibility because I, as a dancer, overstretched my hamstrings and I felt it for a year. So I always say, if you want to improve your flexibility, give imagery a try. It's really a super safe way to do that because in the end, flexibility is a habit anyhow. It's a mental habit. So you move flexibly or you don't move flexibly. And so I recommend trying. I've given people different ways of using mental imagery to improve their flexibility. So flexibility, strength, power, coordination, synchronization, speed. So you can even improve speed. So let's say you're an athlete or anyone who needs to be able to move faster. And as people get older, they tend to slow down. So you can use mental imagery to your movement up. Yeah. And I don't know if we have time, but I can show, everyone can try a little experiment with that. So take your arms and do some boxing, everyone, just like mock boxing, right? And notice how fast you can do that. Notice how fast you can do that. Exactly. Stop. Now imagine you're doing that super fast, like really fast, like box, 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 really, 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 really fast. Good. And then do it again. And it might be easier to be fast. Yeah. You feel that. So speed as well. And then what we didn't address so much is we did address mood psychologically, but mental imagery can also improve your confidence, your concentration, your cognition. So for the last 10 years, we've been researching my training, the training itself. A lot of people say, oh, my class has this benefits, that benefits. I say, okay, let's see if we actually deliver on what we're saying. So we've been researching it. And one of the results we got, which I think is very interesting, that using imagery, taking this class, improves mindfulness. So yeah, obviously you can improve mindfulness by meditating, by doing a variety of meditations, but you can also do it by using mental imagery. So mental imagery, moving with images, also improves mindfulness, and mindfulness is associated with so many diseases, reducing, their prevalence. It's a great outcome. So mental imagery also can help you with that.
Well, love it.
Yeah.
There's one little thing I wanted to talk about here, because this is imagery, but in a sort of a different form. I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about basically imagery for very specific skills. I think in this case it was either hitting a baseball or golfing, right? Kind of a one move, boom. And they talked about how mental imagery is really effective at improving that if you are able to image the right way to do it. So they're kind of really talking about a specificity. Could you sort of address that a little bit?
Yeah, the previous experience. Exactly. That's a big question. How much of a previous experience you need of the movement to practice it? So examples, gymnasts, basketball players. So the basketball player, before they throw the hoop, they have a free throw. You're going to see most of them practicing mentally. But of course, they know exactly what they're doing, right? And same thing with golf, same thing we have also like fencing, for example. It's very precise. You know the movement, so you can imagine it. Well, there is one way out of that, and that's called action observation, which is very related to mental imagery. So let's say you can't do the movement, and we as dancers obviously also did this a lot. So here you are, you're watching this, dancer beautifully going across the floor, and you feel like a klutz, and you go, okay, what can you do to achieve that? Well, you imagine you are that person. So you're standing there, you do a little dynamic imagery. In other words, you do a little bit of the gesture, you imagine, I am doing that right now. So this is a form of action observation imagery. You're watching it and imagine you're doing it, modeling that movement, modeling that perfection. And we know that this helps. So you find the best model you can, right? So I want to learn how to do that movement or that throw or this Pilates exercise, and you watch them, imagine I'm doing that now. And you try to recreate the feeling in your body of you doing that, or the picture in your body of you doing that. So seeing yourself move. It's another thing we didn't talk about is perspective. So in the visual area of mental imagery, you can see yourself actually doing an exercise from the outside, and it's also effective. Yeah, we call that the person effective. So you could see yourself doing it. So imagine now that's me going across the floor perfectly, or you could feel I am doing that, what that person is doing. So that would be a way to practice that.
Fabulous.
So even if you can't do the movement, right? And of course, that's why I think students are attracted to, teachers like Pilates teachers or yoga teachers that move well because they're unconsciously maybe doing that. I mean, there could be two reactions. They look at that and like, I can never do that. Forget it. I'm hopeless. I'm going to give up. That could be one possible reaction, right? But, hopefully the reaction is, no, look at that, model it, imagine you're doing that. So we can encourage our students to, yeah, that's fine. Just imagine you're doing that right now. Fine, you can.
Love it.
That's how you
So,
do that.
So that was great. That was a lot of different ways to think about imagery and a lot of really great applications in a short bit. Next, I think, like, Eric, tell us, and we'll also put this in the show notes, how people can find you, what kind of courses you offer, how people can learn more about this.
Exactly. So you can go to our website, franklinmethod.com, but the training and the training you also took, Nora, of choice to get started is the level 1. And so the level 1, you can start anytime. Just and if you mention you were at this podcast, we'll give you a $500 rebate. How about that? There you go. Special deal for podcast watchers. So do the level 1, and you'll learn all about imagery. You go through the whole body, as you know, and learn all the bone rhythms. And you're going to come out. You'll be a mind-body expert, imagery expert, and be able to teach a lot of cool anatomical interventions. So the level 1 would probably be the thing to do. Of course, I also have short courses, webinars, and some live courses, but those are like small little excerpts like that. So if you want to teach this, then it would be level 1. Yeah.
And I also know, because again, I get all your emails, is you often have these really wonderful little nuggets, a little bit of a video course on something.
Exactly.
And if somebody wants to stick their toe in the water, that's great. Just go onto your website, find some of these nice little nuggets, and just take a little bite of things. Because every time I've done that, it's like, it just refreshes my brain about how to think about that particular topic, and gives me a lot of tools that I can use immediately. So that's another really nice resource.
Thank you very much, yeah. And we also have Instagram, we have YouTube, and all that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, I make a lot of short little videos now and then. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Join me for the next training. I'd love to have you.
Excellent.
That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, I know I was quiet for the most part, but I was taking it all in, because I know Nora and I have both used imagery so much in our practice, and to have the reasoning behind it all and why we do it. And it makes so much more sense now that I'm fascinated. So you've got a convert in me, definitely. And I want to learn more. So hopefully everybody who's listening is going to want to dive in and learn a lot more as well. And franklinmethod.com is the best way to get in touch with you and to learn more about the level 1 course. Or like Nora said, I've taken a number of your small, pelvic power, I think was one, some of the smaller ones that were just phenomenal, that are just blew me away. And it's not very long. They're small nuggets, so they're easily digestible for anybody at any time. So I highly recommend doing that as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, as always, we love it.
Thank you.
So again, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. You can always reach out to us at movingconvos@gmail.com. Instagram, Moving Convos, is the best way to get in touch with us, either through DM or through our Anatominis. And for Nora St. John and Eric Franklin, thank you so much again. I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.